One of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings is the gift which Eowyn gives to Merry. Can you guess what it was? In a way, she had already given him a gift by bringing him along with her to the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, although Merry doesn't know it's her who does it. All he knows is that he will get to the battle somehow. But my lord, Merry stammered when he is told by Theoden he cannot come along with the Riders of Rohan as they go to the aid of Minas Tirith. I have offered you my sword. I do not want to be parted from you like this, Theoden King. And as all my friends have gone to battle, I should be ashamed to stay behind. But we ride on horses tall and swift, said Theoden, and great though your heart be, you cannot ride on such beasts. Then tie me on the back of one, or let me hang on a stirrup, or something, said Merry. It is a long way to run, but run I shall, if I cannot ride, even if I wear my feet off and arrive weeks too late. The answer, however, is still no. And before Merry can firm up his feet to follow along after the riders, he is approached by one of them, the young rider whom he had noticed in the morning, less in height and girth than most, who had the face of one without hope who goes in search of death, and who then says to Merry, You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes. I see it in your face. I do, said Merry. Then you shall go with me, said the rider. I will bear you before me, under my cloak, until we are far afield, and this darkness is yet darker. Such goodwill shall not be denied. The young rider tells Merry to call him Durnhelm, and although he brings Merry along, we read that he proves no comfort. He never spoke to anyone. Undoubtedly it is this, along with the fact that he surely wears some kind of face-covering helm — Durnhelm means hidden or secret helm, after all — which keeps Merry from realizing that Durnhelm is not who he claims to be, or that he's even a he. And if Merry's powers of observation are called into question here, it should be noted that Merry has had very little direct exposure to Eowyn. The one time we know that they speak seems to have been in the dark, and Merry is half her height, and so would have been looking up at her. Not the best angle for instant recognition later on. Plus, and this seems to be the most important element, it would also appear that her mood, that desire for death, has helped to transform her enough, in the face anyway, to hide her true self. Whatever the reason, though, Merry will not know Durnhelm is Eowyn until the moment on the battlefield when she faces the Lord of the Nazgul. Begone, foul Dwemerlake, Lord of Carrion, goes her challenge as she stands between him and the fallen Theoden. His cold voice threatens her. Come not between the Nazgul and his prey, finishing with the declaration that no living man may hinder me. Then Merry heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Durnhelm laughed, and the clear voice was like the ring of steel. But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Eowyn I am, Eomer's daughter. The helm of her secrecy had fallen from her, and her bright hair, released from its bonds, gleamed like pale gold upon her shoulders. Eowyn it was, and Durnhelm also. For into Merry's mind flashed the memory of the face that he saw from the riding from Dunharrow. Pity filled his heart, and great wonder, and suddenly the slow-kindled courage of his race awoke. She should not die, so fair, so desperate. At least she should not die alone, unaided. Eowyn slays the Nazgul's winged mount, but out of the wreck rose the Black Rider, tall and threatening, towering above her. With a cry of hatred that stung the very ears like venom, he let fall his mace. Her shield shivered in many pieces, and her arm was broken. She stumbled to her knees. He bent over her like a cloud, and his eyes glittered. He raised his mace to kill. And here, Merry repays that gift of being brought along. Many times over, it could be argued. As the Nazgul is poised for that killing blow, Suddenly, he too stumbled forward with a cry of bitter pain, and his stroke went wide, driving into the ground. Merry's sword had stabbed him from behind, shearing through the black mantle, and, passing up beneath the hauberk, had pierced the sinew behind his mighty knee. "Eowyn! Eowyn!" cried Merry. Then, tottering, struggling up, with her last strength, she drove her sword between crown and mantle. The gift has been given. Cut to 5 months later. Our 4 hobbits are in Rohan, at last ready to head home. And King Eomer and the Lady Eowyn come to Merry. And Eomer said, "Kings of old would have laden you with gifts that Owain could not bear for your deeds upon the fields of Munburg." Munburg being the Rohirric name for Minas Tirith. "And yet you will take naught, you say, but the arms that were given to you. This I suffer, for indeed I have no gift that is worthy. But my sister begs you to receive this small thing as a memorial of Durnhelm and of the horns of the mark at the coming of the morning." Then Eowyn gave to Merry an ancient horn, small but cunningly wrought, all of fair silver, with a baldric of green. And wrights had engraven upon it swift horsemen riding in a line that wound about it from the top of the mouth, and there were set runes of great virtue. "This is an heirloom of our house," said Eowyn. "It was made by the dwarves, and came from the hoard of Scatha the worm. Eorl the young brought it from the north. He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies, and joy in the hearts of his friends, and they shall hear him and come to him." Then Merry took the horn, for it could not be refused, and he kissed Eowyn's hand, and they embraced him. I love this moment. Now, the most immediate thing about it for me has always been where this horn has come from. The hoard of Scatha the worm. Now, a quick comment about that word, worm. Worm, or worm, in an ancient setting such as this, means a dragon, undoubtedly referring to the long and slithery appearance which dragons were often portrayed as having, not unlike Tolkien's own images of dragons. So, Scatha the worm, or Scatha the dragon. Yet another textual ruin, as the Prancing Pony podcasters have dubbed them. References which tease a history within Middle-earth, but only just that tease. When we encounter them, we, the readers, are left with both a sense of the depth of the world that Tolkien has built, but also with a mouth watering for more. Fortunately, in the case of Scatha, there is more. Reading further along in the book, into the appendices, and the section on the house of Eorl, we find this. Many lords and warriors, and many fair and valiant women, are named in the songs of Rohan that still remember the north. Of Fram, they tell that he slew Scatha, the great dragon of arid Mithrin, and the land had peace from the long worms afterwards. Thus Fram won great wealth, but was at feud with the dwarves, who claimed the hoard of Scatha. Fram would not yield them a penny, and sent to them instead the teeth of Scatha, made into a necklace, saying, "Jewels such as these you will not match in your treasuries, for they are hard to come by." Some say that the dwarves slew Fram for this insult. Okay, so it's not tons, but it's a heck of a lot more than we get of Ancalagon the Black, that other dragon, other than Smaug that is, who gets a mention in the book. Happily, there is even more of Scatha to be had, but we have to go to another book to find it. And I don't mean the Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales. No, that book is the 3rd volume of the collected poems of J.R.R. Tolkien, where we find a poem called Scatha the Worm. For a little history, editors Christina Scull and Wayne Hammond tell us that in 1954, while Tolkien was making final corrections to the gift-giving scene that we've just been talking about, he felt inspired to write a short poem about Scatha. And in it, we learn He was long and rich, and eased his belly's itch with sharp bright stones. But his toys were bones, hands of dwarves and skulls of men that were piled in his den, licked smooth and white. Oh my. Alas, even with the full poem, both versions, my mouth still waters for even more about Scatha. I mean, was his hoard one of the 7 of the dwarf kings of old, as spoken of in the Silmarillion? The foundation of each, it is said, was a golden ring. That is, one of the 7 rings of power given to the dwarves. And if so, was Scatha one of those dragons who Gandalf mentions consumed 4 of those 7 rings? Who can say? I guess I'll just have to be happy with what I've been given. Unlike the dwarves, who were given nothing from that hoard. All of it, including the horn, went south with Eorl, who, after he came to the aid of Cirion, the steward of Gondor, in Third Age 2510, was given the lands of Calenarthon, which became known as Rohan. Another thing about that horn which stands out for me are those swift horsemen riding in a line that wound about it from the top of the mouth, which the rites had engraven upon it. Eowyn says that the horn was made by the dwarves. The implication in that is that they made it for themselves, which makes me think, why horses? A dwarf is no horseman, Gimli declared at one point in the story. And at another, we learned that Gimli was not much more at ease on a horse than Sam Gamgee in a boat. But the text doesn't tell us everything. Remember what editors Scull and Hammond said about the Scatha the Worm poem? How Tolkien started writing it when he was revising the gift-giving scene? Well, one of those revisions was to change the text to simply state that the horn was made by the dwarves. The original read that it was made for our forefathers by the dwarves. Why Tolkien trimmed that, who knows, but the horn seems to have either been commissioned to look the way it does, or the dwarves, knowing who would be getting it, knew the best way to decorate it. They also seem to have imbued it with more than just fine decorations. Let's listen again to what Eowyn says of it. He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies, and joy in the hearts of his friends, and they shall hear him and come to him. Now, before we dismiss that as just a fanciful addition to the history of an ancient heirloom, let's consider dwarves and musical instruments for a minute. Because we do have a couple of data points on this very topic from The Hobbit. In the Unexpected Party chapter, after the dwarves have eaten Bilbo nearly out of house and hole, and helped to clean up afterward, it's true, Thorin calls for the instruments. It is time for some music. Keely and Feely rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dori, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bomber produced a drum from the hall. Bifer and Bofer went out too, and came back with clarinets they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin came back with viols as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. Okay, well, some of these seem as though they could fit into the packs that the dwarves were undoubtedly carrying, admittedly with care so as not to break them. But viols as big as themselves? And while I'm quite certain that Thorin's harp is small enough to hold in his hands rather than resting on the floor, I can't imagine it's as little as those fiddles. Can we then assume that these instruments are so skillfully constructed that they can fit and be carried in a pack or a coat and not be damaged? I see them as being collapsible, able to be folded down into something easily tucked away until needed, which seems like something a dwarf might be capable of doing. And speaking of harps, Feely and Keely may have brought little fiddles along, but they apparently do like their harps. I mean, as soon as they get at Smaug's treasure, we read, Fili and Kili were almost in a merry mood, and finding still hanging there many golden harps strung with silver, they took them and struck them. And being magical, and also untouched by the dragon, who had small interest in music, they were still in tune. And before we dismiss all of that as just a fanciful addition to a children's book, which The Hobbit of course is, let us remember a long-expected party in The Lord of the Rings, and what we learn of the presents which Bilbo gives away to the Hobbit children as part of the celebration of his 11th birthday. There were toys the like of which they had never seen before, all beautiful, and some obviously magical. Many of them had indeed been ordered a year before, and had come all the way from the mountain and from Dale, and were of real dwarf make. And there's that word again, magical. We don't necessarily think of dwarves as being magical, but these creations of theirs seem to indicate that they are. But if the musical instruments aren't enough, let's talk about doors. Dwarf doors are not meant to be seen when shut, Gimli says of the doors of Durin, made by the dwarf Narvi. They are invisible, and their own makers cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. Not unlike Erebor's secret door in The Hobbit. Oh, and shall we get into moon letters that can only be seen when the moon shines behind them? As Elrond informs us, the dwarves invented them. So, am I saying that dwarves are like elves who can put the thought of all that they love into all that they make? Well, yes, I am saying that. Now, whether what Eowyn says about the horn is just a fanciful addition to the history of an ancient heirloom, or if it is truly, and yes, I'll say it again, magical, remains to be seen. For now, let's just linger on the fact that this horn is a very worthy gift. And it's also a fitting one as well, because horns have very much become a part of Merry's journey. The first of these would have to be Boromir's, a great horn tipped with silver, which Merry would have first heard along with the rest of the Company of the Ring as they all depart from Rivendell. Putting it to his lips, he blew a blast, and the echoes leapt from rock to rock, and all that heard that voice in Rivendell sprang to their feet. As impressive as that is, though, I'm guessing that that is not the sounding which Merry would most likely remember of it. That would surely be the one heard as he and Pippin are captured by the orcs at Parthgalen. Then Boromir had come leaping through the trees. He slew many, and the rest fled. But they had not gone far on the way back when they were attacked again, by 100 orcs at least, some of them very large, and they shot a rain of arrows, always at Boromir. Boromir had blown his great horn till the woods rang, and at first the orcs had been dismayed and drawn back. But when no answer but the echoes came, they had attacked more fiercely than ever. That last horn blast from Boromir's lips must echo in the hobbits' minds, along with the sight of him impaled by arrows. As Merry moves on, it's the horns of Rohan which take the place of Boromir's. He becomes surrounded by them, in fact. When he arrives in Dunharrow, we read, "As the king approached, many men sprang up out of the shadows of the rocks. Then one blew a long call on a horn. It echoed in the valley. Other horns answered it, and lights shone out across the river." The effect has clearly worked on Merry, because by the time that he and the riders reach the Druidan forest, we learn that Merry wanted someone to talk to, and he thought of Pippin. But that only increased his restlessness. Poor Pippin, shut up in the great city of stone, lonely and afraid. Merry wished he was a tall rider like Eomer, and could blow a horn or something and go galloping to his rescue. with the passage to the riders through the forest granted by Ganburi Gan, the way to the battle is clear. And the intensity of this moment is matched only by the horns which accompany it. "Ride now, ride to Gondor!" Theoden cries. With that, he seized a great horn from Guthlaf, his banner-bearer, and he blew such a blast upon it that it burst asunder. And straightway all the horns in the host were lifted up in music, and the blowing of the horns of Rohan in that hour was like a storm upon the plain and thunder in the mountains. It sounds all the way to the gates of Minas Tirith, which the Lord of the Nazgul has just battered down. Horns, horns, horns! In dark Mindolluin's sides they dimly echoed, great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last. And Merry, riding with Durnhelm, is among them, and surrounded by them, and immersed in the sound of them. And these are the horns that Eomer means when he speaks of that memorial of Durnhelm, and of the horns of the mark at the coming of the morning. The same horns which are both a ruin to the Lord of the Nazgul's seemingly triumphant entrance into Minas Tirith, as well as an overture to his eventual end, brought about by Eowyn with the aid of Merry. But of course, even without all of that, Merry has kind of grown up with horns, or one particular horn anyway. We the readers experience it many months before that glorious morning in Gondor, way back in Crickhollow, where Frodo's house has been left in the keeping of Fredegar Bolger, who thinks he has made the wise move in not accompanying his friends on their quest. Until one evening when a blow is made on the door. "Open in the name of Mordor," said a voice thin and menacing. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back, with timbers burst and lock broken. The black figures passed swiftly in. At that moment, among the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It rent the night like fire on a hilltop. "Awake! Fear! Fire! Foes! Awake!" The brandybucks were blowing the horn call of Buckland that had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the white wolves came in the fell winter when the Brandywine was frozen over. "Awake! Awake!" Far away, answering horns were heard. The alarm was spreading. Merry, of course, is in Bree when this happened, so would not have heard it. And being only about 37 during The Lord of the Rings, he would not have been alive during the fell winter to have heard that call either. But such alarms cannot be left to just happen when they're needed. Surely there would be regular practice sessions in Buckland to be sure everyone knows what to do and when. Merry, as not only a brandybuck but a future master of Buckland, would almost certainly have heard those horn calls, at least. It can be supposed, though, that he never expected to hear them sounded in a crisis. The Shire he left was under the watch of the Rangers, although he didn't know it at the time, and so it was safe and secure, as it had been all his life. As a result, Merry undoubtedly assumed that the horn he is given by Eowyn would be just what Eomer said it was, a memorial of a great battle, and no more. And so he probably envisioned it hanging above his fireplace, like Bilbo did with Sting in Bag End. Or maybe it gathering dust in Mitchell Delving, like the mithril coat that Bilbo received from Thorin. Did he suspect that he would be winding it, and so soon after receiving it? Well, if he had put two and two together, he might have. After all, there had been hints about what Sam calls some devilry at work in the Shire. There are those visions of destruction which Sam sees in the Mirror of Galadriel, and the presence of pipeweed from South Farthing in Saruman's larder, and the sight of many faces in Isengard similar to that squint-eyed southerner they saw back in Bree, and the appearance of the Rangers, or the Grey Company, arriving to ride with Aragorn to war, meaning they are no longer protecting the Shire's borders. With so much happening, I suppose he can be forgiven for not deducing the problem. Things begin to get real, though, as they get closer to home. First overtaking Saruman on the road to Rivendell, who tells them, "It will serve you right when you come home if you find things less good in the South Farthing than you would like." Then, when the four hobbits get to Bree, they learn from Barlam and Butterbur that things were far from well. "There was trouble right here in Bree, bad trouble. Why, we had a real set to, and there were some folk killed dead, if you'll believe me." At last, they are back in the Shire, where they find that Lotho Sackville Baggins has turned dictator, calling himself the chief and being backed up by dozens of ruffians, who they eventually discover were sent there by Saruman. Had Merry suspected any of this, he must surely have felt as Pippin does. "Of all the ends to our journey, that is the very last I should have thought of, to have to fight half-orcs and ruffians in the Shire itself." Fight they must, however, and Merry begins the task by declaring, "Come on, I am going to blow the horn of Rohan and give them all some music they have never heard before." And when he does, Sam is heading for Farmer Cotton's. He had not gone far when he heard a sudden clear horn call go up ringing into the sky. Far over hill and field it echoed, and so compelling was that call that Sam himself almost turned and dashed back. His pony reared and neighed. Then he heard Merry change the note, and up went the horn cry of Buckland, shaking the air. Behind him, Sam heard a hubbub of voices and a great din and slamming of doors. Later, when Ted Sandyman blows a horn of his own, hoping for some help, Merry laughs at him and says, "Save your breath, I've a better." Then, lifting up his silver horn, he winded it, and its clear call rang over the hill. Out of the holes and sheds and shabby houses of Hobbiton, the hobbits answered, and came pouring out, and with cheers and loud cries they followed the company up the road to Bag End. And again, let's remember those words of Eowyn's about the horn. "He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies and joy in the hearts of his friends, and they shall hear him and come to him." Is this then that magical quality which the dwarves who made it seem to have imbued the horn with, revealing itself? I would certainly say so. And it works extremely well. Merry assembles an army of hobbits, and they take on the ruffians and scour the Shire of their evil influence. He has, in essence, fulfilled his own wish in the Druidan, when he could blow a horn and come galloping to the rescue. This horn, then, after all these centuries, is still doing its job. And so it is not merely a worthy gift and a fitting gift, but a timely one as well. It also does not gather dust. Reading deeper into the appendices, we learn that in Buckland, the horn is sounded at sundown every November 2nd, the anniversary of its first having been sounded in the Shire. And in true Hobbit form, bonfires and feastings followed. Now, the horn is not the last gift that Merry will receive from Rohan. In the appendices, the Tale of Years tells us that in Shire Reckoning 1432, Meriadoc, called the Magnificent, becomes master of Buckland. Great gifts are sent to him by King Eomer and the Lady Eowyn of Ithilien. And his connection to that land remains throughout his life, culminating in Shire Reckoning 1484, when a 102-year-old Merry goes to Edoras at the request of Eomer and is with the king before he died that autumn. We don't know if Eowyn was still alive then. She would have been about 89. But if she was, she surely would have been there too. And I cannot imagine the three of them not reminiscing at some point about their past glories on the battlefield, during which Merry must have regaled them with his story of the victory of the hobbits at the Battle of Bywater, which was entered into thanks, in no small part, by the sound of that very horn which he had been gifted with so long ago. They surely would have enjoyed that tale. Even more, I would say, than a song about Scatha the worm, from whose hoard the horn had come. And all of that is why that horn is one of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.